Hello, and welcome back to the Breaking Butterfly podcast. If you're new here, a very special welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. I have a very exciting episode this week because I have a Meta alumni with me. And oh my God, when did you even take Meta? It had to have been like 2 years ago
I think it was
now.
fall of 2022. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. So me and Jody have known each other for a couple years now, and she has had one of the most massive transformations that any Meta alumni have ever had. I mean, I would say every single person that goes through metamorphosis has a massive transformation, but Jody's is unique and it's a pretty big one. So we wanted to hop on and just have casual conversation about her journey and where she was in fall of 2022 and where she is now and all of the things that come up around what Jody did during Meta, which was a big leap. So, but
hmm
yeah, to start us out, Jody, do you want to say hello? Tell people who you are, where you're from, what you do, just kind of
Yeah.
basics.
Yes, absolutely. So, like Maddie said, I have known her for a couple of years now. So, I did Metamorphosis back in 2022. So, I've kind of been on my personal spiritual journey for a little bit longer. That I would say that definitely is kind of what kicked it off. And I was a referral of another awesome woman named Maggie from Meta. So,
Yes, love
great
Maggie.
to
Shout out
have.
Maggie if you're listening. I
Yes.
love
Love
you.
you, Maggie. But I am from Cedarburg, Wisconsin. So now I live closer to the Milwaukee area, but Cedarburg's a cute, tiny little city that I grew up in. We called it the Cedar Bubble. But yeah, like Maddie said, it's been a crazy few years for me. So I guess as far as kind of who I am now, I'll share a little bit about that. And I was thinking about this today, and I feel like just really looking at like what my life is really like on like a daily, weekly basis. I feel like that's probably the best way to explain kind of who I am, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So huge CrossFit athlete. I would say health and wellness is one of the biggest parts of my life. So just staying active. I've learned a ton through being in the gym and just grinding through the mental side of things and having goals, and we can get into that a little bit later, but CrossFit's a huge part of my life. I coach. I'm there, 4 to 5 times a week. Other than that, I live with my boyfriend, Dustin. I'm sure we'll talk about him a lot because he is my best
Mhm.
friend and the absolute love of my life. And we have his daughter, Macy, part-time. She's almost 8 now. Other than that, I absolutely love being outside, even if it's just taking the dog for a walk. I love sitting in our backyard and watching the deer. I was actually having a weird interaction with the family of deer before I hopped on today because they are always wandering around our backyard, and it's really funny to me
Oh my God, I'm
to just
so
interact
jealous.
with the does. Yeah. Um, I love reading spiritual books, fantasy books, murder mystery type books, into knitting. I'm sure I'll kind of get back into knitting this winter season, but yeah, that's kind of, I guess, more on a weekly basis. That's kind of what my life looks like.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, guys, Jody is such a badass. I was just looking at your like one of your last videos of like a PR, like a squat
Mm-hmm.
PR. And I'm just like, damn. I used to be like that. I really wanted to be a power lifter, not CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
I could never do CrossFit, but I wanted to be a power lifter. I just think it's so empowering, like seeing a woman just like pick up a fuck ton of weight,
Mm-hmm.
or like squat it
Yeah.
down and just push it back up. I don't know. I love that. So I think you're very uh inspiring and powerful. And honestly, I don't know how you do it though. Like powerlifting, it's like you lift it up once. CrossFit is like cardio and like it's like everything. It's like pushing
Yeah.
your body to the limits.
Yeah.
It's
That's
kind of
why it's so
wild.
fun to me though, because I've been doing it for over 7 years and there's always something that you can work on. So even going into each specific workout I do, like yesterday we had 4 different movements, but I was like, I want to work on being better at the assault bike. So my goal was like, I just want to be above a certain RPMs for the portion of the assault bike. That's all I care about. And then I end up, hauling ass for the whole rest of the workout too, right?
Yeah.
But it's really just being able to like hone in on those specific areas that I want to work on. And then like the strength portion is kind of just fun, but as far as getting better at specific movements, it's really like a mental grind during the WODs, which I think is really fun.
Yeah. Yeah, so fun.
Yeah,
Sounds like my nightmare.
for some of us, yeah. Some people, it's not their jam, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, my best friend in Utah is the exact same way. I don't know if what she does is like CrossFit or if they have a different name, but it's some type of hybrid of that. And it'll be like Friday night, and I'm like, "Oh, like what are you doing?" Like it's Friday night, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go like do like a marathon length cycle run lift thing." And I'm like, "Okay, have fun. Like I'll be over here." But no, I love that. I love that so much. Okay, so I think let's take it back to like the very beginning.
Hmm.
Let's like before Meta, can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like and then why you decided to join?
Hmm.
And let's start there.
Yeah. So Maggie had told me about Meta, I think a year before I joined. And when she first explained it, I was kind of like, okay, I don't really completely understand the whole concept of like, I was like, oh, there's like classes and stuff. Like, tell me more. And I think it was around that time frame. So that would have been like, I think winter maybe of 2021. I know I
Yeah.
started following you on Instagram and then I started listening to the podcast. So that's when I kind of entered into your world a little bit. And then that summer before that, um, so I guess backing up a little bit more. So I was married. My divorce was finalized the January of this year. So I was with my husband for a little over 7 years total, married for 5. So when Meta started, we were obviously still together. And I was just really struggling a lot before metamorphosis in general. And I just kind of felt like I was really just drowning. I had really bad anxiety. I had kind of depression, depending on the day type situation, and just really did not feel like I was living in alignment, and I really had no idea what to do. So I think that kind of summer going into that fall, I believe Meta started that October. When I started seeing your postings for it, I literally, the universe was like, you have to fucking do this. Like, yep, you're doing it. And then I remember our call, I had absolutely no hesitancy. I was just like, at first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to Maddie. This is so crazy. Cause I've been listening to your podcast for like forever. So I was like, holy shit. Um, but yeah, I remember I just like signed up on the spot. I was like, here's my credit card, take my money. Like this is a full body fuck yes. Right. So,
Yeah.
was super excited going into it. And it's crazy. I've gone back and watched some of the videos and went through some of the lessons again, and just looking at myself on those videos is so, it's like sad but in a good way, because I'm like, holy shit, I was like a shell of myself at that point, because I was just
Yeah.
like, everything in my life was out of whack. But I think again that really stemmed from just like being with the wrong person. So throughout Meta, I think a huge piece for me was kind of the belief change practice, but then also just really with that, starting to kind of undo all of these things that I thought about myself, that I thought about like who I had to be. And just kind of through that program, I started to really understand like who I was as a person. And the farther we got along through it, kind of going into that next year, I was like, okay, I think my marriage is over. Um, Let me see. So that was fall of 2022 last year. So the first time then I tried to leave my ex husband. It was more of a, I was trying to go through the process like mentally. So I had kind of like pre-planned. I remember like opening hunting weekend, I just sat in my hunting stand the whole weekend and was like mulling over this huge decision. And it wasn't just like, oh, this summer was bad, this fall was bad, let's do it. It was like a couple years in the making of going through, therapy and talking to friends and my mom, and just really digging through a lot of things. And there was a lot of things that my ex and I were able to work through. I think we really got to a point where we were able to have good communication about like, if something was wrong, let's work through it. And I think it's actually when we got to the point where there weren't any huge like issues to work through anymore, where I still was feeling like a voice screaming at me like, leave,
Yeah.
this is not for you. um
And
so
that's
that
always the
first,
I feel like that's the hardest part. Sorry to interrupt, but just
That's okay.
like I feel like it's the hardest when there isn't really any problems. Like, it's one thing for someone to be, like, abusive or mean or you're fighting every single day to be like, "Okay, we're done." Like, obviously, this isn't working, but it's a completely different experience to hear this, like, whisper and this nudge and this voice inside of you that's just like, something isn't right. And there's been other women inside of Meta too, I think one of them, at least
Mhm.
that it was the same thing. She's like, "Oh, I felt that way when I split with Henry for that, break that we had." It was like, I wish that he did something. Like, I wish there was something wrong that I could, like, blame it on because I had to, like, go through this process, and I'm curious if it was the same for you of, like, convincing myself of, like, 2 different things. Like, I kept trying to convince myself to stay, and I kept being like, "No, but look at this and look at that. Like, why would you leave? Like, he's so good for you in this way, and he's so good in this way." And then I'd hear that voice again of like, no, something's not right. So then I would convince myself the other way. It's like, okay, it's like pros and cons list, like every single day of, well, here's all the reasons why you shouldn't leave. And here's all the reasons why you should. And I felt like I was actually going mad because I didn't know which voice to believe. Um, did you have that same experience?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're kind of taught that, like, if there isn't a huge red glaring issue, it's like you've made a commitment, whether it is to a significant other or a fiance or an actual spouse that you're married to. It's kind of like you work through things. So I think there's kind of that level of pressure as well from just like how we were raised. But I did leave that first time, right? That winter. So November 2022, I tried to leave for the first time and picked the worst timing. I left the day before Thanksgiving, which was not bad. It was bad timing, but I also didn't want to go through the holidays feeling completely like fake and just like stressing out knowing I was going to be doing this.
Yeah.
But then on Thanksgiving Day, I went to my parents' house and like that gut wrenching feeling of just like grief, I mistook that for like, you made a mistake. And I just completely lost it. And in that moment, decided to go back. So the time between then and when I actually left for real was about 3 or 4 months, I want to say, maybe 3 months. And yeah, during that time frame was just that battle back and forth, like every day of like, okay, you came back, like we're in our comfort zone again, right? We're back where we were, like you're fine. And then as I knew it was going to, that feeling started creeping back in. And I was just like, oh shit. And I was like, well, you made your decision, you came back, so like you don't get to do this again. And the
Yeah.
second time, it was like a full body feeling of like, you have to leave. I was doing a day long training for work actually. And towards the end of the day, I messaged my boss and I was like, hey, can I like not come into the office for a few weeks? Like, I'm just not doing well. And she was a huge mentor for me actually throughout my entire last couple of years of my marriage because she had been divorced as well and had a really similar situation. And she was like,
Yeah.
hey, she's like, you need to take time off. Like, you're not okay. And I don't like seeing you like this. And like, I want you to do what you need to do for yourself. And I got off the phone with her and I called my mom and I packed a bag, took one of the dogs and left. And I think because it wasn't planned, it was just like, that was when my entire body and soul and like the universe were like, it's now, go. And I literally just like numbed out for like a week after that. But yeah, that back and forth was so exhausting.
Yeah. It made me, like, sick. Like, the feeling I had
Mhm.
of, like, like, I need to leave was literally, like, gut-wrenching. Like, I felt sick to my stomach, and I was doing crazy things too. Like, I'm not usually the type of person who's, like, asking for signs from the universe, but I was doing all sorts of things, like, if I'm supposed to stay, like, show me a blue I was, like, literally on a camping trip. I'm like, "If I'm supposed to stay with Henry, show me a blue butterfly." And this butterfly starts, like, fluttering by me, and I couldn't tell if it was blue, and I'm, like, running down this river, like, trying to see if it's blue because I just needed an answer, like yeah, I just couldn't figure out what was right and what was wrong, and so I was like, "Okay, now show me." It's so funny you brought up deers because I was like, after I broke up with Henry, I was like, "Show me a deer if I made the right decision," you know? And I was just, like, looking for everything outside of myself to try to ease my mind. And looking back, I'm like, okay, if I were to give someone like advice on this, because it's not always the right answer to leave, right?
Yeah.
And but a lot of times it is when you're getting that nudge over and over and over again. And I like think, okay, what advice would I give to someone that's in that place of, having this back and forth? And I don't know what it would be because that I guess listen to your gut, like your
Hmm.
gut is right. I feel like what I learned our experiences are so interesting because we both have like the same experience, but then like I actually did end up going back, whereas you
Hmm.
found like the motherfucking love of your life and it was someone else, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But even though I got back with Henry, I always say like I still don't regret leaving. Like it wasn't the
Hmm.
wrong decision for me to leave because we wouldn't have been able to be in the relationship we're in now without that break. So if you keep getting like a whisper and a whisper and a whisper and a whisper, it's probably telling you to do something. And it doesn't mean oh you're not supposed to be with this person ever again, but there's something for you to go discover. But I'm curious to hear like what your advice would be if someone's listening right now and they're like, "Oh shit, like I'm having such a similar experience." Like what would you say to them?
I feel like it's so dependent on the situation because for me, I thought about that too. I thought back about like what would I have done differently, and I do think
Yeah.
initially I was like, maybe if I would have been more honest with him about like how I was feeling throughout that time period versus just being in my own head trying to make this decision, but then just seeing how he reacted after the fact, and we can kind of
Yeah,
get into
you
that
can't
if
be
we
like
need to. But
you can't be like, "I'm thinking about leaving you. I just wanted to let
right?
you know to, like, ease the
Yeah,
weight." Like
exactly. Because then he would have been like, what? Like, you're like, this is your anxiety talking. This is your depression. Like, I feel like he would have tried to convince me that, it was because of mental health purposes or something. And I'm
yeah.
like, no, that's not, that would have been bad. So I think the main thing is to just more look at your relationship as a whole, because obviously in general, if you're around someone that as often as you are with your significant other, you're going to get annoyed with them sometimes. There's going to be days where, you guys kind of are living separately. Like if you live with your person, some days it's going to feel like you're roommates and that's okay. But I
Yeah.
think the red flags that I noticed during my marriage were like when people would talk about going through breakups, I would feel like jealous, which felt
Mm,
so weird to me. I'd be like, why do I feel jealous of that person that they're going through like this shitty time? That makes no sense.
yeah,
Or,
I felt that.
yeah, or like another one was just honestly because the emotional connection wasn't there, the physical connection was not there. So I just never ever wanted to be physical, and I'm very much someone who needs to be like really deeply connected with someone in order to want to be physical with them. So like that just was like never there, and I thought it was just like depression and anxiety. Um
Yeah.
I think just looking at couples that are super like we're super happy, I would both be like jealous of them and be like, "Oh my gosh, that's what I want." But then there's a part of me that was also like, these people are fooling themselves. Like no one's really that happy. No one actually likes their significant other that much. So I think there's kind of these little things that I started to notice like added up over time. And I did have a situation where I started getting emotional feelings for another person, and I think it was more so just some of the like tendencies and values that this other kind of man had, that I felt like my ex didn't. So just like working towards goals, just really being able to kind of have that grit that we were talking about with CrossFit. So it wasn't necessarily, I figured that out after the fact. I was like, it wasn't necessarily him, it was just, oh, this is some of the stuff that I'm missing from my
Yeah.
husband, and I need someone that cares about growth and being better like as much as I do. I can't be with someone that's fine, that's just like, oh, here's where I'm at, it's fine, I don't need to grow at all. It's just like, what? I don't understand that. So I think it's so many things, but I think it's just really recognizing those aspects, and then also just like how you literally feel around your person. Like when I get home and I like open the garage door and I see Dustin's car is here, I'm like, yay, Dustin's home. Like, it's just
Yeah.
those types of things. And with my ex, I would be home and I'd hear the garage door open and I would get like a wicked bubble of anxiety. And I'd be like, fuck, you have to be okay now. Be in a good mood. Oh my God. And like, even thinking about it now, I'm just kind of like, ugh, no. So it's so many things, but just really pay attention to what version of yourself you are around them, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all of that. Could not have said it better. Like, I love that you brought up even those like specific little examples of like, I forgot about that. Like, yeah, kind of feeling like jealous of someone or like, yeah, having, I don't know, even just like a friendship on a deeper level with someone that has attributes that like that person isn't giving you, it just like shows you what you're missing. Like, all of those pieces I think are so important.
Mhm.
So, and okay, so you were saying you would see other people, you would be jealous of them because they did have like a happy, amazing relationship. And you're like, oh, no one's like actually that happy. And now I feel like you are that couple. Like you are that couple where people would be like, oh, it's fake because like they can't actually be that in love or whatever. Do
Mhm.
you still believe in that? Do you still believe, oh, like people who are so happy are faking it? Or are you now like, oh, no, this is real and this is the standard. Like this is what you get to have.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I completely feel now. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what people are talking about. And I'm sure you can like see it on my face right now when we like talk about this because it is so insane, like how much I love this human. I literally feel like my chest is going to explode sometimes because I fucking love him so much. And it's like I wish nothing less for like any woman or man, obviously, but just like, we
Yeah.
have this special connection with like our meta girls, for example, and like all my friends. And I'm like, I just want you all to be like this happy. So absolutely that, shifted so much when I met Dustin.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you were, well, okay. I was going to ask a question, but I feel like we already kind of answered it. I was just going to say, like, do you feel like when you were in your marriage, you kind of doubted that that even existed for you? And I know we talked about how, like, maybe even doubting that people are that happy to begin with. But I think some people, where my question was stemming from, is like, I think a lot of people are afraid to leave their current relationship because they think it's like the best they'll ever get, or they don't feel like they're worthy of, like, having more, or they just don't even think that type of person is out there. Did you ever have a doubt that the type of person like Dustin even existed? I think so many people are like, there's no good guys out there and all men are like cheaters and liars. And I don't know, girls kind of have this like vendetta against men. Did you have that at all? Like, is that one of the reasons you maybe held back from ending it?
I don't think that was one of the reasons, honestly. I don't feel like I was someone that was ever like, "Oh my gosh, I'm, like, terrified to be alone." I think it was more for a while, honestly, and the first time I, like, even, like, said the word divorce to myself in my head and talked to my therapist about it, I was like, "Oh, shit, I said it," you know? But it was I feel like
Yeah.
the part that was the scariest was just, like, knowing what I was going to have to go through, and then also, like, honestly, the freaking logistics of, like, selling the house and figuring
Yeah.
out an apartment situation and a living situation. But yeah, absolutely. I feel like even early on in our marriage, when we had, dumb arguments or when, we started to kind of maybe slide into being people that we weren't when we were just dating, I think specifically, I remember when we were like moving in together because we had gotten engaged before we moved in together. And the moving process was when I started to see some red flags. Moving's just stressful, and some people are like chill about it, and some people are just kind of like, like that. And that was kind of the first time I saw that like monster come out, and I was like, oh no. And I was like, okay, well, we're already engaged. Like, you have to like accept all of someone, right? So I think it was
Yeah.
little things here and there, but definitely throughout, and especially towards the end, I was just like, I do not believe that that is something that actually exists. And after we split, I was, yeah, just in a really weird headspace of just, it's really weird to be grieving something that you chose. And I'm sure that
Yeah.
you went through that with you and Henry. I don't remember if it was mutual or if you had made that decision, but like you're grieving something, but it's something that you chose to do. So it's this really weird, like middle ground. Um, and I definitely, even when I met Dust before, kind of close to when I met him, I was just like, okay, people are stupid. Like love is fake, but I'm just going to like have fun and do whatever I want to do. And then when we like started dating and stuff, like I think it started shifting without me even realizing it initially.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Grieving something that you chose is such an interesting, even like thought.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like the hardest part for me too was like you're talking about all the aftermath, like the house and everything. For me, the hardest part was my cats. Like you said that you took one dog with you that night that you left.
Hmm.
Like, I know this is probably a sensitive subject. I don't even know why I'm bringing it up because it'll make me cry. Like, I fucking
Yeah.
hate talking. Actually, kind of, I'll bring some light to the subject. My grandma, it was like kind of funny. She has Parkinson's and she's just getting older and like bless her heart. I love my grandma. She's so sweet. She means well. I feel like she means well. But she was so forgetful that she would forget like what she had asked me. And so she kept asking me about my cats like during the breakup and I was struggling
Mm.
so hard and like you said like I did choose that. I was kind of the one that initiated things. But I was still like grieving and my heart hurt about my cats. They were still with Henry. I didn't have either of them. And she would just ask me like, "How are the cats? Like, when are you going to go get them?" And I'd be like, "Grandma, like, please don't ask me about that. Like, I don't know when I'm going to see them next." And then it would like 10 minutes would pass. And she'd be like, "So Madison, how are the cats?" And I'm like, "Grandma, stop
Oh.
asking me about the damn cats." Like I was just like bawling and she just kept being like, "So the cats." I'm like, "Dude." So I know that probably was difficult too. Um, I
Yeah,
don't
that
know.
was so hard. Yeah, so initially, and I am so blessed that I had somewhere to go. My friend Jess, freaking shout out to Jess if she ever listens to this episode.
Shout out
I had been
Jess.
talking to her for months actually, like, hey, I have a feeling it's gonna happen soon. Like, I might need to come stay with you. And I'd like text her that like once a month, I think for like 4 months before it happened. And she'd be like, yeah, the basement room's ready for you whenever. Like she had a bedroom in the basement with a king bed. There was like a living room down there and a bathroom and stuff. So she was just like, yep, you're good to go whenever you need to come here. And I was just like so grateful that I just consistently had that option for when I needed it. So I know some people don't have that luxury and might have to go through a situation like this and stay, living with the person. Um, but when I had initially left, so I brought Cleo with me. Jess was out of town for I think 3 or 4 days for work, and then when she came back, she had her dog with her, and she brought her dog back. And both of our dogs are kind of like alphas, so we quickly realized like that was not going to work. So I had to bring Cleo back. I switched and tried to bring Boone with, and then same thing. The dogs like just weren't getting along, so I didn't have either of them with me for a while I was living there, which was tough. But then I did end up bringing my cat Marley over there, so that was nice.
Nice.
At least I had my kitty cat. Um, but now we each have one of the dogs and stuff, and yeah, I feel like initially when I had decided, I remember actually very vividly, I had a conversation with my therapist and she's like, I was freaking out. She's like, you can be done. Like, I feel like I needed that permission from her to be like, you can be done. And I just like looked down at Boone and I just started bawling because I was just like, my dogs, no.
Yeah.
But then when I moved into my apartment, I got to get Cleo back and it was tough to have to, separate them, but we're actually on decent terms now, my ex and we watch the dogs for each other now when we have out of town trips and stuff. So we don't have to pay for sitters and the dogs get to hang out. So that's actually pretty nice.
Oh, I love that. I love that that's where you guys are at.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I just wanna say too, even through all of that mess, like, it's worth it. Like, now you like,
Hmm.
even if you didn't have one of the dogs for a while, like, I didn't have my cats for a while, like, even if someone's worried about, yeah, the living situation or what's gonna happen with this, and we share furniture, like, as messy and hard as it is, like, it's always gonna be worth it to go through that because it's a very small amount of time or a small sacrifice for the rest of your life. Like, either you can not go through, a couple months of, like, shit and mess, and then you like, or what did I just say? Either you don't go through the shit and the mess, but then you deal with like the shit and the mess for a lifetime because you never do anything and you're miserable for a lifetime, or you just go through it and yeah, it's a couple months and it sucks, but now you're like the happiest you've ever been. Like it's just always
Mhm.
always worth it to do the uncomfortable thing.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
yeah. What do you
And I
feel
remember
like
too. Oh, go ahead.
no, you go because I was going to change the subject, so I want to hear what you have to
Oh,
say.
okay. I just remember like the initial like leaving and just being like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a long road of stuff to go through. And I was like, I just want to fast forward like a year. Like, I just want to be like through this. But then I met Dustin like 2 months after that. And then
Yeah.
I was still going through a lot, and I actually feel like there are a lot of things that I would not have processed outside of a relationship. It's almost like stuff came up for me to process and
And
move on from because of stuff that came up in our relationship. So even though it was like super fast, I feel like I was able to kind of like process the divorce and that grief and everything while also like being in this new relationship, because I was with someone that was so like amazing and open with me. And we just, from the beginning, honestly, I feel like because I had such a cynical view on relationships, I was just like, I'm going to be my complete self. I dare you to try and fucking date me right now, dude. And like, that actually ended up being exactly what we needed at the beginning, to just be like, this is who the fuck I am. Let's
yeah.
go.
Oh my God, I love that you bring that up because a lot of people feel like they need to be single to heal. And I think it's the exact opposite. I think you need to be in a relationship to heal because I was like so toxic with my first ex. And then we broke up and I felt like I healed all of these things. And I went on like my spiritual personal development journey. And then I got with Henry and like the shit came back up again. And I was like, I thought I healed it, but it just wasn't coming up because I wasn't in like that intimate relationship. And I mean, I think it's all about the right person. I think the reason people are like, "Oh, you need to be single, like don't date for a while, like figure yourself out, find yourself out." People who are speaking from that perspective are saying that because they probably dated someone who wasn't letting them be themselves, who wasn't letting them discover
Mm,
themselves or wasn't helping them heal from things. Like they weren't, yeah, like that equal partner. But if you have that equal partner, you should be able to have your independence and discover yourself and find yourself again and also be in relationship with
mhm.
somebody. Is yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
love that. It's just about the right person.
yeah, I will say I am definitely glad that like I signed a lease and moved into my apartment May of last year. So I did have my apartment for like a full year of us dating, and I moved in here with him yeah, a couple weeks before May of this year. So I'm glad that I was like locked into a lease, because I feel like we probably could have ended up moving in earlier than that. So while I don't think it was a mistake that we started dating so early, like I do think it was so important that I had that time living by myself, because for one, living alone is so amazing. I feel like everyone should do it at least at some point in their life, because you actually really
Completely
get to
agree.
see as a person, what are you going to do when you can actually really do whatever the fuck you want all the time. And that just says a lot. But I think there was just, I needed to be okay. I needed to learn to be okay having stretches of days and sometimes even weeks at a time where I was just by myself, and I needed to like figure out how to do that before I could be happy and healthy with him living together without being like too clingy and too like what are we doing? Like we need to be together all the time. Like we're
Yeah.
both now very much like, all right, you go do your shit. You know, you go play magic cards with the guys. Like I want to go have a girls' night and do this, whatever. Like, and we're both like happy for each other to go do our own separate stuff. But then sometimes we also do that separate stuff like together. So I do think that was really helpful for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I loved living alone. That was like some of the best times of my life. Honestly, I completely agree with you. And even now, like me and Henry, we both travel a lot for work. Like he's going to LA like 2 or 3 times a month. I'm in Costa Rica. I'm hosting retreats, whatever. Even like festivals. Like there's a lot of festivals that he just goes to with like his boys, and I have girl time. And sometimes I'm really sad about it because obviously I miss him, but I think it's the best possible thing. And one of the things we did do wrong, like the first time we were in a relationship, we were like glued to the hip, like at all times. We both worked from home. like we went through COVID together. We were sharing a room with like 3 other roommates in our townhouse. So it was a 3-bedroom, and then there was me and Henry in one room, our other friend in another room, and then our other friend in another room, but with his girlfriend, like kind of like unofficially moved in too. She was just there all the time. So there's like 5 of us and a big ass pit bull and 3 cats. Like I had no space, like literally no space at all. So now like sometimes I'm sad when I won't see Henry for like 3 weeks, but then it just makes you miss them. And like you're saying, like you get to have that independence, miss each other, go do your own thing. And then when you come back together, it's just so much better. So I'm actually grateful for it that we travel so much. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
hard, but
Yeah. I agree. I've had a couple stretches of time where I haven't seen Dustin for like over a week. And the last time was hard. So he had to work down in Chicago for a week. And like when he left, I like had to drop him off somewhere, and I was driving back home, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like I just left a like chunk of my soul behind. I was like, I feel like I left my phone somewhere, and I'm just kind of like, ah, I was just like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but it's fine. But when you're the one who's out, going to do something fun, you're just kind of like, okay, bye. But I feel like when you're the one stuck
totally.
behind, you're like, oh, don't leave me, please.
Don't leave
But it's
me. Oh
always
my
good to
God.
have that time.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Okay, so I'm curious to hear, what do you feel like you learned or took away from Meta that helped all of this? Like if you didn't have this lesson or this perspective or this mindset, obviously you had thought about leaving the marriage for like quite some time and you hadn't until was there something in the program or something that happened where you're like, okay, now I have that confidence to leave? Or even maybe a shift that you had that you could say, okay, if I didn't have this shift, I probably wouldn't have met someone as amazing as Dustin, because this lesson or perspective, made me see my self-worth in some way. I'm curious to hear like what from
Mhm.
the program is like this created that shift.
I think throughout the whole program for me, it was so I feel like you always use the analogy of like a diamond covered in like dirt basically. And I feel like for me it was so much of like unlearning things that I thought about myself, or like that I thought I was supposed to be. So for example, like just living in a house with him, right? Like I was just getting verbally from him and just like energetically just this vibe of like you have to be okay all the time, and like when I would go there,
Yeah.
and I'm someone who just goes through waves, right? So I think like already kind of having it in my head, like if you're having down days, there's something wrong with you. And then hearing it from him of like, hey, like, are you depressed again? Like, what's going on? I thought you were going to therapy. Like, our life is good. Why can't you just be okay? Kind of stuff. Like, there was just so many of
Mhm.
these beliefs of like what I should be, how I should be feeling, what emotions are acceptable, what is not. You should
Yeah.
want kids already. Why aren't you ready for kids? There was just so much of this stuff. And like, I know we talked about like the bitch in your head during Meta. And for me, I've realized actually even more recently. So like I have, the bitch in my head, or like, my ego that kind of is sometimes a dick and stuff. But then there's also all of these other voices like society, our
Mhm.
parents, our exes, where like those things are just coming at us. Right. So I think for me, it was like really starting to just dig into that and figuring out, like, I feel like I keep going back to the belief change exercise. I feel like that was huge because that's actually something I've continuously gone back to when I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I have these few things I'm struggling with. Like, what if this is actually me and true? And like, is it who I want to be? Even if it is something that came from myself, is this still who I want to be? So I feel like kind of starting to sift through that. And then I think a huge piece too, like that kind of came from Meta, but just like in general for me is just like honesty. I feel like Meta forces you to like look back at yourself and really assess, yeah, if you're living the life that you want to, and if not, that's fine. But what do you really need to start doing to step into that person that you want to be? And now I think that is just completely my philosophy with everything. Is like just be honest. And I don't mean like, be an asshole to your partner and be like, "Oh, you're really pissing me off today." But like more so just, hey, for example, like I'm essentially a parent now. I went from living alone to living with my boyfriend and essentially being a parent. So I think just being
Yeah.
like, hey, like, that tantrum was like really stressful for me. Like, how did you experience that? And just being honest about that kind of thing
Yeah.
comes from having the confidence in knowing that whatever is for you is not going to leave you. I think that was like a huge thing that was like I needed to know. And I feel like that was something that kept coming back up through Meta, and that I think in general, I feel like I've just heard a lot. But just knowing
Yeah.
like if I am myself, if I say something that's my truth and it's a problem and I end up alone somehow, like that's what it was supposed to be. So I feel like it is just really like it was so much just figuring out who I am, but even more so like who I'm not and who the fuck I do not ever want to be again.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, what a crazy experience to feel something and have it be your truth and then over and over be told like this is wrong and you're not supposed to feel this way. It like makes you go crazy and it's like the number one like diminisher of confidence. Like how can you ever stand in your power if someone's making you feel like everything you're feeling is wrong? Like, yeah, whether it's about having
Hmm.
kids or just having like an off day and just being like you're not supposed to feel that way. Like that is I mean, whether you know that they're wrong or not, some people might have someone telling them those things and be like, "Okay, he's right. Like I'm not supposed to feel this way." And even on the flip side, if you do know like, "Okay, this person's telling me I shouldn't feel this way and I know they're wrong," but like it's still going to hurt. It's still going to feel like that's even what I went through with the Mormon church was like over and over people telling me, well, you're supposed to be like this and you're supposed to act like this and you're supposed to believe this. And even at a certain point, I was like, no, like, but I believe this. And I don't think it's right for you to tell me that, but it still like affected my confidence. And so I agree that like the most powerful part of metamorphosis is I feel like the underlying theme is just authenticity, saying how you really
Hmm.
feel, being who you truly are, like what because when you finally do that and you be who you are, that's why you found such a perfect match. If you were even
Hmm.
like a little bit less, like if you went through the transformation but not completely, like you were being more of yourself but not like fully your fucking self, you probably wouldn't have met Dustin. You probably would have met someone that was better than your ex, but not like soulmate level. And like so the more that you are yourself, even what you were talking about, you said something funny of like when you're kind of like down on love and you're just like, fuck it, I'm just gonna be who the fuck I am and like love it or leave it. Like that's why you attracted someone that is now a perfect match because you can't find your perfect match unless you're being 100% you in every single way. I love that
Yeah,
that
I
was your
think so
answer.
many people. Yeah, I think so many people make that mistake early on of like, oh, I really like this person. Like, who do I need to be for them to like me? And it's something that can happen so subtly that you don't really realize you're doing it. But then, yeah, like the person might fall for who you're pretending to be, and then when you start to kind of slide into yourself, they might be like what's going on? This wasn't it. Um,
Yeah. Well, and I feel
but
like it's
yeah,
kind of
and
sounded
I.
like sorry, I was just gonna say it sounded like that kind of could have been the issue with the marriage to begin with, right? Because like, you're everything's great and you get engaged, and then you have like such a stressful situation. I think everybody should see someone like through a move or through like a serious illness or travel with someone and have like, you know, like some kind of like crazy stressful travel thing to see those true things because yeah, you kind of like saw this one person and then started to slip through the cracks and you're like, "Oh shit, this isn't what I signed up for."
Yeah, and I think so. I think, yeah, there's definitely things people should go through before they decide to get married. Like you said, something kind of stressful, like a move, definitely traveling together. And then I literally think, and this seems so obvious now, but my ex and I never had any sort of conversation about like, what are we expecting out of our partners in a marriage? Like, what do we want? What do we not want? Like, what are our expectations? What are our values? And is important to us in life? And I think that's probably because I was 25 at that time. I didn't even know to ask those questions. I was just like, it's a tough world out there. We love each other. I guess let's just get married. Like, why not? But that's definitely not that wasn't enough. And I
Yeah.
want, yeah, I hope people know to have those conversations and really figure it out. And it's really interesting too. I think in like early to mid 20s, it can be so much more, you can feel more pressure, like, oh, I have to get married soon. It's like my timeline. And now, like, we've been together for a year and a half. I live here, and we have no rush of like, okay, we have to get engaged next. We're like, we'll probably have a baby before we get married. Like, who the fuck cares? That's where we're
There's
at, but it doesn't feel like
no
there's any like
timeline.
external pressure. We're just confident in like what we have, so that's enough.
Yeah, no timeline, no rules, like, even, like, don't have a label if you don't want it, like, I think so many people I don't know, I feel like the dating world's, like, a little fucked up right now, not for everyone, right? Some of us are out here thriving, and other people I don't know if you saw the post that I made that I was getting, like, really spicy about people and dating and, like, I don't know,
Mhm.
people being really, like, picky about, oh, they
Picky.
can't wear low socks, or they can't do this, or like, oh, they don't have tattoos, so they're not my type. And like, I don't know, people just have created all these rules around like, this is my type and this is not, and it should look this way and not this way. And if someone like, doesn't open the door for me on the first date, like they're not a gentleman. Like, I don't know, people are creating these crazy rules around and just stories around like the way things should be, and I just feel like people should be a little more open to the experience, have high standards, but don't be so like picky or create these weird rules. Like, let it just be what it is. Let the attraction grow, or let your dating story be completely different than anything else you've ever seen, and I feel like more people will have more success with relationships.
Well, and I think people forget, I think there's certain like core aspects of a person that might and should be non-negotiables, right? But things like
100%.
holding the door for someone or certain dumb things like that, like maybe not dumb, maybe to someone that's really important. But you know what I mean? If it's something like that, that's an easy change. That's something that you can so easily just be like, hey, I really feel special and cared for when you hold the door for me. So just, it's not even like, oh,
Yeah,
when you don't do it, it makes me feel this. Just give that like positive, like, hey, this is something I do like, and this is how it makes me feel. And just like offer that up and see if they listen and see if they implement that. That's almost a good test, even to see if they are paying attention to like what makes you feel a
yeah.
certain way. Right. So there's so many things like that, yeah, maybe people are using as like something on their checklist that really should not be there.
Exactly. Yeah, this like checklist of how things should be. And oh, what was I just gonna say? I just lost my train of thought. Um, oh, I was gonna say that, yeah, I think the most important quality is if someone can listen to you and make changes, not that they're just like perfect to begin with. So yeah, I don't know, being able to say, hey, even like Henry, I'll like tell him what to say to me. I'm like, babe, I want you to say this when I look cute and I'm dressed up, say this exactly. Like, and he'll say it exactly. And I'm like, thank you. And most girls would be like, oh my God, you're only saying that because I told you to. And I'm like, that doesn't bother me. I don't know, just be honest. Tell people, hey, this is exactly how I want you to support me. Um, I even have like had an experience like this before in a coaching program. And, it wasn't like my program, but someone was saying like, I like I don't feel supported in this way or whatever. And the coach was like, "Well, then tell us, how do you want to be supported?" And she listed all the ways that she wanted to be supported. And then we were all like, "Okay, let's do it." And then we just all started like supporting, giving love in this specific way, and sometimes you just have to fucking ask. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like for so long we just think our person is supposed to like read our minds and stuff. And I've definitely done that a ton with Dustin, and I feel like I can only do that because I know myself, and when I experience like a thought or a feeling about something, I'm like, "Huh, that's interesting. Like, let's dive into that. Like, where does that come from?" And I think right now I'm also trying to balance like doing that analysis with just letting stuff go sometimes and knowing when to do which is a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah.
But like one of the things for me that is huge is like verbal affirmation. So like literally we were like out to dinner a few months ago and I was like, "Can you tell me why you're in love with me?" And he's like, okay. And then went on to this whole thing. I was like, okay, cool. Sometimes I just need to know because sometimes I just don't feel like it's, that you do because you're just like so amazing. And I just like can't even believe that you're my boyfriend. So sometimes I need you to just tell me that. And he's like, okay, I will. I was like, all right, cool. Like it's that fucking
Exactly.
easy.
That fucking easy. Just ask.
Yeah.
Literally just ask.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love
But
that so much.
yeah, back to what you were saying though about kind of being able to have those conversations and someone being willing to change. I feel like a huge green flag that you should look for if you're looking for someone or even in your current relationship, is if someone can listen to what you're saying, whether it's about them or something completely separately, and not make it about them. That is such a big fucking thing. Like even stuff that is semi related to Dustin, I'll like bring up and he's able to just like hear me and help me work through it instead of being like, well, how do you think that makes me feel? He doesn't bring it back to himself. He just like
Yeah.
lets it be what it is. And it's so fucking amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I fucking love that. Yeah, so okay, tell us a little bit now. You're in love, so happy. You've got, yeah, stepmom vibes. You've got your babies, not your babies, like your dog babies with you. Um, what would you say is like the best part about your relationship now? I want to hear like a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's everything is just fun when you are with your person. Like we can be just like cooking breakfast or like going to the grocery store and everything. It's just like so much more fun. And it's just I think being able to actually like legitimately be myself in like my home is like such a huge thing. And he's just like such a big cheerleader of me. Like it was really cute the other day. He came to my first class, my first CrossFit class that I was coaching. And then afterwards he was just like, he's like, yeah, I really liked watching you coach and like your coaching voice and everything. And he was all like bashful. And I was like, okay, he's digging it. He's digging like the authoritarian vibes that I'm putting out during coaching. Like, and then he kind of told my parents about it too. It's just like, oh, it was just really cool watching Jody coach and like be in her element. So like, it's just great. Like we're just each other's biggest cheerleaders, and like we just have so much fun together. And yeah,
Mm,
again, I think because we connect on such a deep level, like going from where I was at before to now
yeah,
having sex with someone that you connect with that much is so different and
different ball game.
so amazing.
Different ball game. Oh my god. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, if you guys like get anything out of this, it's just that this exists. Like this kind of love exists where it's just like mutual love, mutual support. Things get to be fun. Like yes, there's hard moments and conversations and insecurities and things still come up, but like it's supposed to be fucking fun. You're not supposed to be bickering all the time. It's not supposed to be stressful. Like it's supposed to be fun. The sex is supposed to be good. You're supposed to want to have sex. Um, it's supposed to feel natural. You're supposed to be able to feel like you can be yourself and that you can bring up anything and they're not going to get all defensive and angry at you. And this exists. And that's what I love about showcasing something like this. It's not even like all of the little lessons that we talked about and any like I could give them a tool. I could give them, the belief change practice, which I will. I'll leave that in the show notes, by the way, if anyone wants to check out the practice that me and Jody keep talking about. I'll leave like a free download link. But sometimes it's not even that. It's just even believing that this is possible. That's why I'm like so grateful that you can like share all of this and be like, hello, living, literally a living, breathing example of a transformation from from like playing small, settling, just being like, okay, this is fine. This is like how it's supposed to be, to being like, fuck no, that's not how it's meant to be. I'm claiming more for myself. I want more. I want more out of life and out of my relationships. And you fucking did the damn thing. Like, I'm so proud of you. You should be proud of yourself. I'm so happy for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes I forget that it was like a huge deal of it's like a huge deal to go through all of that and to like get
Oh
where
my
I'm at
god.
now. So yeah.
It's a
So I guess
huge deal.
yeah, question for you then. So if there are people out there that might be in a situation where they're like wanting to get back together with someone or they want to take a break, what would you tell them, I guess, about how you knew it was right to get back together with Henry and how things were different the first time versus the second time you were together?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's such a great question. Okay, so I would say that if it feels more comfortable to get back together, then you probably shouldn't. Because getting back
Mm.
together felt just as uncomfortable as like another breakup almost. Like it was so uncomfortable. We had so many nights where we talked for like 8, 10 hours. Like we didn't sleep and my eyes were swollen shut from like crying and talking about every single thing. I think it's also important to note like you can't just I think people try to get back together because it's more comfortable and then they don't really like talk about things. They kind of just like brush things under the rug. And the thing about that is like it's never going to be brushed under the rug. Like it will come back up again. And that's why getting back together was so hard, is because we had to talk about everything. We had to talk about all the things we never talked about, all of our biggest insecurities, our shadows, our deepest, darkest fears, every thought we've ever had. And it took a long time. There was probably like 3 months of us like getting back together, kind of, where we're like, okay, we're going to be like exclusive now. And then even after that, we would have moments of just, I would say it probably took us like a year and a half to be at like a really good place where we weren't having like triggers come up often of shit that happened during our breakup and also like during the time we were broken up and all of the things then. And it was so complex, but that's how we built it to be this new relationship. And we were broken up for enough time, and it wasn't like a break where we knew we were going to get back together. I never thought I was going to get back together with this man. I never thought I would see his face again. I was often like dating somebody else, and like I never ever even had a thought that maybe we would get back together. And I think that was important because we weren't just like taking a break again for like, it was like we were talking about like marking off like a checkbox where it's like, oh, this will be good for us. Let's just like check off this box and take a couple weeks away and come back. That wasn't enough. Like we had to both leave, find who we were without each other. Henry had to go through his own journey of figuring out who he wanted to be outside of me. And I had to go experience all these things that I wanted to experience that I thought I wanted and see for myself that I didn't actually want them. And if we didn't break up, Henry would have never found like his passions because we were just like kind of comfortable together. Like I was saying, we were like conjoined at the hip and we just kind of were in this like comfort. And then I would probably still be sitting here wondering, should I go live this other life? And, I thought I wanted to like travel full time and have this like glamorous life and be like polyamorous and date all these people. And like, I like romanticize this like idea in my head of like lifestyles I would see on like social media. And I thought that's what I wanted. And I experienced it and I was like, no, I'm good. So I think I would still be sitting here like wondering if I had never had that um experience. But yeah, I would just say like if it feels comfortable to get back together, please don't. Like it should be a brand new relationship with completely brand new people. And I know some people say like
Mhm.
I used to even feel this way when people are like, well, you shouldn't get back together because you broke up for a reason in the first place. Like someone said that to someone recently in front of me, and I was like, mm, actually, I completely disagree in every single way possible because people can change, people can evolve. I used to not believe that people could change. I was like, no, people kind of like stay the same. No, people can completely 180 become someone completely different. And then if you
Mhm.
come
Yeah,
together,
it's
is that
funny. I think about oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, I was done.
Okay. I think about that sometimes and I'm like, because I'll see random posts from like people in college or something that were just complete like party people. And now they're like, oh, on their third kid. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, that's so funny that people can just be like frozen in time in your head of like who you knew them at a certain point. And I think it's just very important to realize like people can absolutely change. But I think back to what you're saying about like the discomfort aspect, I think that's something that I've learned so much the last couple years is so much of growth is just like sitting in the discomfort and sitting in those shitty feelings and just like letting yourself feel them in a healthy way versus like, I mean, I will say I was definitely like drinking a ton when I was going through my divorce and like living in Jess's basement. Like I rewatched like
Same.
Euphoria and Sex Life and was just like drinking tequila downstairs, just like I'm just letting myself sit down here and be in a hole. And I think it was important to like let myself go through that phase kind of. Um,
Yeah,
but then I feel like the actual growth came from like more once I was living alone and just having those days where I was like, okay, like I'm gonna journal and like really think through some of the stuff that I've gone through and like where I'm at. And I think even now it's just consistently like I'll have this stuff come up where I'm just like, oh, okay, interesting. Let's feel that and dive into it. And I just feel like so many things you need to go through that discomfort in order to get to something like amazing. I feel like if something's easy, it
absolutely.
can be okay, but if it's like uncomfortable and like stretches you, it could be like fucking awesome.
Absolutely. It's so funny, like, I knew how similar our stories were, but I feel like we keep picking up these, like, little, like, threads even more of, like even more ho similar of, like, our I don't know what I'm trying to say, how similar our experiences really are, because I was the same way, like, when me and Henry broke up, I didn't realize, I thought I was just, like, yeah, having fun and, like, living this lavish lifestyle, and I was, like, living in Tulum, and, like, I was, yeah, also drinking a lot, but I just saw it as me having fun because I wasn't really like that. I was obviously sad and the breakup was hard, but, like, I wasn't so broken up. I didn't feel like I was, like, masking my emotions. I was just kinda, like, having some drinks because I was on the beach and I was doing this. But then I feel like it
Mhm.
did get to a point where, yeah, it just, like, covered up everything, and I didn't really sit with discomfort because I was just having, like, so much fun. And then, I got my own apartment. I left Mexico, went to Utah, started getting back with Henry, and that's when, like, the shit started. Like, it was so heavy, and I struggled so much because I had to sit with everything that I didn't sit with when we had first broken up. And amongst other things, there was, like, 3 different things that, like, piled on top of each other at the same time. And then, yeah, I was just forced to sit with it, and I was, like, in my apartment alone, didn't have any distractions, and I was like, "Fuck. All right, here we go." And now I just finally feel like I've came out the other side just this year, like, in the past 6 months. There was, like, a year there where I was just, like, going through it, but I'm so glad I did because I have such a different perspective now. But it was a little
Mhm.
crazy there for a second.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think it's so normal for us like spiritual girlies or just anyone that is going through any sort of like growth or changes essentially. Like it's so normal for us to go through like waves, whether that's like some days I'll like wake up and be crabby and then I'll have an awesome day at work, then I'll be home like get home and I'll just be in like such a good mood and then I'll have like maybe a full week where I just kind of feel like shit. And then I have like a full week where I'm just like feeling great. And for a while, I'd be so hard on myself about it. Like, ugh, we did all this work. Like, why are we still having these down weeks? When really, I think you kind of have to let yourself go through them in like a healthy way. And I think that's why it has been so helpful to be with someone like Dustin who just like, he sees me and sees where I'm at and he's not going to say anything unless he's actually concerned and he just like knows how to support me no matter what part of like my wave that I'm in. And I think that's just really really important for someone to like let you be yourself and not try and like fix everything if you're not at like ground zero or above.
Yeah, 100%. It's like the classic, like, do you just want me to listen or do you want advice? And having the person that can do both, It's just like let you be in your shit. And then also if
Hmm.
you do want to like fix it or you need like support getting out of it, then they can be there too. But
Yeah.
yeah, me and Henry are always like, do you want my perspective or do you just want me to listen to yours? And that is like the most helpful question that you could ever have in a relationship.
Yeah,
Oh my
definitely.
God.
I think in my marriage, it was so much of like at a certain point, I just stopped talking to him about stuff because I had to like explain my feelings to him. And sometimes, you're feeling stuff, you don't know why you're feeling it or like exactly what the feeling is. So like having the discomfort of having bad feelings and then also having to just try and like prove it to someone else and then also having them make you feel like
It's
those feelings were not
exhausting.
okay was just layers of shit. And I was like, I am way too exhausted to like do this and have this conversation. But that is why I started just shoving everything down. And that is when my anxiety and depression got really bad. So like that is
Yeah.
something too. I feel like those things would not have been able to like flow back out of me without Dustin. Like we just had a lot of good conversations and there'd be so many times where like randomly stuff would like come up and I'd be like clearly holding back tears and he'd be like, Jody, it's okay. Just let it out. And I would just like melt the fuck down and he would just hold me. And like so many times last year, like, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I can just like cry to you for no reason. That's acceptable. Like, are you sure? Like, I cried 2 days ago. I'm crying again. Are you sure that's not too much? Like, ugh,
Oh, I love him. Tell him hi from
yeah.
the Breaking Butterfly listeners and Maddie.
Yes, I
Everyone said
will. He was
hi.
getting in the bathtub when I came in here. He's taking a nice little bath.
Oh my god, wait, I love him. I feel like he is totally like golden retriever, man.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yes, definitely. It's so funny. I'm like so much more like when we go on trips, I'm just like, okay, we have to plan stuff. And I have all of these like restaurants and things to do, like tagged in my phone and stuff. And I'll be like, what do you want to do? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, do you want to go do this? You're like, okay. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Like he's just like so go with the
Amazing.
flow and can just like handle all of this crazy shit, which makes sense. Like he's a police officer. He has to be able to like handle stuff without freaking out. But I'm just like completely the opposite. So I feel like it's a good balance.
It's a good balance. Oh my god, yeah. You need like you can't have two people with anxiety, right? You've got to have one person that's like not that you have anxiety right now, but someone that's maybe like more susceptible and like more like wants things planned out, and then the person that's just like, yeah, whatever. I feel like that's how me and Henry are
Mhm.
too. Like, I'm always having
Yeah.
something. He's just like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
Oh
That's
my gosh.
interesting though. Speaking of that, I feel like when I like literally when I like left the house, when I left my ex, like my anxiety was essentially gone, like immediately. Like
Yeah.
there's just like a weight lifted and my anxiety was gone. And then the first time I had to go back to the house to get more clothes, like it was like the whole property was just like a bubble. And I like went back into it and I was like, oh, I was living in this. No
Oh,
fucking
that's
wonder.
so interesting. That's kind of how mine
Yeah.
was too. I was like struggling with like my OCD and like, yeah, just pretty much like phobia fear. Part of it was like because I was somewhere that I wasn't supposed to be. It wasn't necessarily Henry. I just knew I wasn't supposed to be there. So I was on edge. But then it was also like living in LA too. But I was the same way. I was having panic attacks almost every single day. And then I left and I was like, oh, I'm healed. I think a lot of times mental health issues are environmental, and I feel like people don't want to admit that or like see that as a truth, but it's true. Sometimes you're not crazy. You're just somewhere that's making you feel like you're crazy, but you're not crazy.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've fucking loved this conversation. I've loved having you. I feel like so grateful and so excited that we finally made this happen. Me and Jody have been wanting to do this for so long and it just hasn't been like the perfect time. And I feel like right now is like the perfect time, even just how this conversation flowed and where you're at in your life and your relationship. I feel like this episode is filled with so many just like golden nuggets. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would want to say to my audience to kind of like wrap things up? Anything you feel like we haven't touched on that you just want to share one last message?
Yeah, definitely. I think I have a couple things. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think really being able to tap into your intuition and your gut feelings is so important when making these decisions in relationships, but even in general. I really tapped into that actually during like my job search this year, for example, and just recognizing like how you're feeling around certain people and if you're starting to feel those little pings here and there of like, hey, this isn't good for you. Like I think earlier in my 20s and even mid 20s, I didn't really listen to them. And then now I feel like I'm just so much more in tune with with those like gut feelings, and I'm like, oh, there's a reason I'm getting these. And it's also
Yeah.
important to know the difference between like having a gut feeling that's like negative, and then also having like maybe anxious anxiety about something that's like, not anxious anxiety, anxious excitement, I should say, about something that is an opportunity, but is going to be uncomfortable, but will push you. So I think just
Yeah.
like really getting to know yourself and how you're feeling about certain things is really important to kind of get you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
And then also, I just want people to know that you don't have to go through all this stuff alone. I think that is definitely like when I invested in Meta, that was like the first huge thing that I was like, all right, I'm doing this for myself. And before that, had been in therapy as well, but doing, you know, Meta, going to Costa Rica. I'm working with Jane now for like the second round. I have invested, I think, over 10, probably like $12,000 in the last couple years in myself with coaches. And I wouldn't, the best money I've ever spent. Literally, I
Mm.
hired like a job coach that's a spiritual girly, and she helped me through my job search process. And just, it's, there's resources out there. And I know some people maybe don't feel like they're in the financial place to do that. Just if you have people in your life that feel like just there's someone that you look up to and that they have the energy that you want to be around, like really lean into that and be
Yeah.
like, it can be scary, but you're like, hey, like, I would love to ask you some questions about some stuff, you know, that I know you've gone through or that you know about. Like, let's go get some coffee or something. Like, there are free resources as well. So I think just knowing that, like, you're not alone. And I think that's something that I felt when I was going through my divorce was like, oh, I'm the only person that's ever been in this situation. And like, that is so far from the truth. So lean on your people, hire coaches, do whatever you need to do for yourself because it's so worth it.
Yeah. I fucking love that. It's life-changing, and I feel like it can sound, like, almost, like, cheesy, like, find your community, find your sisterhood, but if you really think about it, like, we're meant to be in, like, villages. Like, even children are meant to be raised by, like, a village. It's supposed to be, like, teams coming together, and this whole world, like, it's about connections and relationships and working together. Like, it's kind of crazy that we get this belief instilled in us that, like, we're meant to do it alone, or that, like, it's weak to share our problems or something, because actually, yeah, whether it's a free resource or a friend or a free community online or something lower ticket or something high ticket like a retreat or like a one-on-one coach or anything, like literally anything, like that is going to save you time, money, tears, because it is, you're going to have someone get you somewhere faster and easier and quicker and with less mistakes, and with, it's going to feel good. It's going to feel more fun because you have the support, you have the person or people like really there for you, and you don't feel like you're fucking crazy because you're definitely not the only one going through this. Like, I've seen it time and time again. So, yeah, I think that's why I really felt, I shared with Jody a little bit about the change I made to Metamorphosis, and I haven't shared it too much on the podcast yet, so I'll take like a little quick minute to share about it. But I just felt like Metamorphosis specifically, I wanted it to be more accessible for this exact reason. It's like all women need confidence, all women need to really like raise their self-worth and have these like realizations that you had, and realize like they don't have to be this way, they don't have to be stuck here, they can be authentic, they can go after what they want. And I mean, just all the things that Meta is, it just, yeah, I made it so it's $97 a month. People can come in, they come in for 6 months. If you want to stay, you can. If you want to leave, you can. And I just feel like there's a time and a place for these higher level experiences too. Obviously, I have like higher tiers if you want more one-on-one support or want a more intimate group with me. But something like Meta, I was just like, I want everybody to have the type of transformation that you had, because it can create these massive changes, whether it's in your business or your finances or a relationship, where you just realize, wait, this is who the fuck I am and this is what I deserve. And it's just like, even if what comes after the shift is messy, the shift is simple. The shift is just like, oh, okay, this is like my new frequency. This is where I live at now. So, yeah, I think any space you can get into where it can, give you the support and love you need, but also help you get somewhere faster without making as many mistakes as you would if you were just doing it on your own. It's so valuable. It's so, so, so valuable. You're losing money by not having support, you know? So I love that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've shifted literally everything since Meta, and it just was like a domino effect. So definitely you
Yeah.
have to start somewhere.
You have to start somewhere. And if you don't know where to start in Meta. Come join us today. So I'm going to release this podcast tomorrow. Tomorrow's actually the last day that you can join. So if you're feeling the pull, if you resonated with Jody's message, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, yeah, I need to get started in some way and I'm terrified, but I got to do something. Meta is like the perfect place to start that journey and then continue it on. So, oh my God. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. This has
Yes,
been an
thank you.
amazing episode. Yes.
Yes, it was so fun.
Um,
I'm glad we finally got to do this.
yeah. Yeah, me too. We'll probably leave if Jody wants me to. We didn't talk about this yet, but maybe I'll leave her Instagram in the show notes just in case anyone like resonated with this message and wants to reach out and say hi or say thank you. I can leave that in the show notes. And I'll leave the meta link in the show notes and I'll leave the belief change practice in the show notes. And then I will see you guys in the next episode. Okay. Love you guys. Bye.